Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, going back to March of 2013 this week as we talk about the first Andorran band on the podcast, Persefone, a band that I feel like we've kind of danced around quite a bit over the years, but never quite got to talking to in long form. But before we talk about all things Persefone, how are you, my friend?
Lovely. I am just lovely. I ended my week listening to the Japanese edition of Labyrinth's Return to Heaven Denied, which, as we mentioned last week, had a completely different song order, and I decided to shoot a message to Mr. Olaf Thorson to ask him why there was a different track list, different order, and I await his reply, but I will make mention of it next week if I hear back from him, because I'm always curious to know if that is a band decision or a label decision or what. But I have to say, I think I kind of like the order better. It really flowed better for me, and mind you, this is an album that I gave a 9.5 to last week. So I mean, I feel like, I think I had said to you earlier, like, you could put these songs in any order and they're going to be great. You know, the old Discman on shuffle thing. But I really like the order, how they did it, and it ends really strong, and there's a nice bonus track at the end with the acoustic version of Falling Rain. So all in all, I typically don't like deviating from, the original for things, because typically, the things are done for a reason, but this was quite good. So I'm hoping we can get a answer from the horse's mouth as to why that happened, because I've seen it happen before, but it's pretty seldom.
It is rare, but when you have an album that's as well done as something like this, you really can just throw them in a hat. It almost doesn't matter. And because it's not a concept album, it's not something that I think really relies on an order per se. So I'm not surprised that the other version or the other Japanese order was something that might have even appealed to you more than what you were used to, just because you were so familiar with the songs. And obviously when you give scores, like that, they're all great songs to justify a score of a 9.5 or a 10 in my case.
No, it makes complete sense to me. So it'll be interesting to see if we at some point discuss another album where something like this happened. I mean, the only one really off the top of my head that I could think of where the entire list of songs is completely shuffled is the Andy Darris Coming from the Rain Japanese edition. I'd mentioned that last week, and just that on the Dark Ride, the first two tracks are flipped on the Japanese version, but like for a whole album to just have a totally different set list, it's really, really interesting. And so I'm really curious. I'm probably just going to end up getting like the most disappointing answer, the
label made us do it,
or like the guys at Victor just decided they were going to do it.
We had no idea.
Yeah, they didn't even tell us.
Out years later.
Yeah. Or maybe he doesn't.
Sadly,
maybe he doesn't even know, and we're
breaking news to him.
Yeah.
Well, I had the pleasure of listening to a couple of new things this week that I think are worth mentioning. The first is the third album by a German symphonic metal band called Visionatica. The album was called Harrowing Insight, and if you're into that like female-fronted soprano over the top of symphonic metal thing, you're going to love this. I don't know that it's anything extraordinary or anything that's groundbreaking, but it's just an album that was, I thought, very well done in that genre. So that is something to definitely check out. And if you're looking for something a little bit heavier, a little more aggressive, might I suggest the new album by Destinity, the French progressive / melodic death metal band. This has got to be their like 9th or 10th release at this point. The album is called Ascension. And although I didn't think there were like more than one or two standout tracks, I thought the whole album was good from top to bottom. So I was craving some melodic death metal this week. This set definitely like satisfies the itch. And the album's only about 42 minutes. So, to that end, I think it was like very digestible. So I will definitely post one of their tracks this week as well.
So you didn't have enough death metal listening to the Andorrans all week. That's surprising to me.
Yeah, sometimes you just need just a little bit more. Although I'll say that the guys from the French band Destinity not quite as technically proficient as the guys from Andorra, but yeah, we'll get there. It's a pleasure to talk about this album. I have vivid memories of Spiritual Migration coming out in 2013. I remember getting it like right around the time that it was released. It was released on March 29th of 2013. So we're going on a dozen years now. Had you heard of this band before this album? I know this was something that I kind of told you to listen to and something that I was kind of on the bandwagon for, but did you have a chance to listen to this or this band before this album, or was this kind of your first exposure?
I'm trying to remember. It would have coincided with when they were announced to play at Prague Power. So let's go into the time machine here. And so they played in 2018. So it would have been in 2017 when I guess I had known of them because I remember you telling me about this particular album when it came out, because I actually added it. This was the first Persefone album that I had. And then I think when they got announced for Prague Power, I started grabbing the back catalog, and I guess Athema would come out either. Can't remember if it was out when they were announced or before or after or whatever it was, but
in close proximity for sure to that announcement. I remember that coming out.
Yeah, and so based on the songs I've played the most, I would assume I listened to it quite a bit going into their performance, which I ended up missing, unfortunately. I ended up missing the first two bands, and then oddly enough, Labyrinth playing Return to Heaven Denied was later that night, that we discussed a lot about last week. I got back to the venue for Bloodbound and Labyrinth, which followed Manimal and Persefone. So that was back in my really like random picking and choosing bands to go to, not like the last 2 years where I've seen like almost the entire festival basically. So yes, to make a long story short, I had listened to this album, but probably the title track and Bind as Universe were I listened to a bit more because I think it was part of their playlist at the time. The playlist was mostly songs from Athema, it looks like, and then a couple of songs from Spiritual Migration. So I knew going into this week, I knew what to expect as far as what the band sounded like. But I think this was really my first real deep dive into just listening to an entire album start to finish. I guess other than like their most recent album that came out 3 years ago called Metanoia. Since then, I think it's just been the EP that came out last year. So yeah, that's kind of, this was not like, this didn't really take me by surprise. I think I would have been like, as soon as the growl started coming out, I would have been probably taken aback if I didn't know what I was going to expect. But I found this very dense and like hard to put into words. So I'm probably just going to sprinkle in like little comments here and there. Cause like, this was like, I wouldn't say I disliked it. I just, it was just like very like, dense is the word. Like I just was like, I felt like my mind was being blown, and it was just kind of hard to like put into words how I felt about certain things. And I like that it kind of like takes breaks where it needs to be, like, because it's really heavy and extreme in parts. So like, I feel like you kind of need a breather. And so, we'll talk about that as we get to it. But I felt that was kind of helpful to kind of break up the, it's almost like when you're eating too much salty food and you need something sweet to just kind of cut the salt, or vice versa. Like you just need that, just a little bit of something else to just kind of cleanse the palate, so to speak, a little sorbet in between courses. So yeah,
palate cleanser.
Yeah, exactly. So what were your like? I know that especially when this album came out, they were definitely on your radar. So like, what were your thoughts when you first heard them, like at the time?
So this was not the first time I had heard the band, but it was the first time I had really paid attention. I remember sometime after the album prior to this came out, and the album was called Shinken, but the album was like, I don't know, I think it came out 3 or 4 years before this, so it had been on the radar. I had listened to it. I wasn't blown away by it. I could see why certain people were. I thought it was a little more raw, a little less polished than this, but I was fully aware of the band when this album came out. And the first thing that really attracted me to the album, ironically, was the cover. I always thought that the album had really cool cover art. It was obviously like a digital rendition of what I'll call like a planet in the background with like a flash of lightning bolt going into the water below it. But there was something about the album art that really spoke to me. And then I listened to the album for the first time, and I think I was just more into the death metal stuff as time went on. So by the time 2013 rolls around, I am like fully on board with a lot of these, not only death metal bands, but progressive death metal bands, much like Persefone. So I was ready for an album like this at the time it came out. And it just knocked my socks off. And I don't know that I've listened to an album of theirs that has hit me the same as this album. This might be their best album for me. I don't know that I've paid as much attention to the new stuff as I probably should. I've listened to all of it, but I remember when Athma came out, the direct successor, just being like, it's good, but this album that preceded it was better. It was just markedly better for a number of reasons, which I'll get into.
Very good. I needed your take on that, because I don't think I listened to the previous material until after Spiritual Migration, so I was kind of out of order there. I remember hearing of Shinken, but I don't think I've ever really sat down and listened to it, honestly, at least start to finish. So, I think we should give our you had mentioned last week that friend Josh requested this, and so even though it was technically your choice and not like the typical first episode of the month where we take a request, but since he requested it, we figured we would have him share his thoughts anyway. And so he sent us another video blurb, just like he did for Times of Grace last year. So why don't we turn it over to our friend Josh? I'm certain that he can put this into words way better than I ever could. Let's hear it from Mr. Josh Anderson, and then we'll come back and march through this thing. So take it away, Josh.
What's up, my metal dudes? It's Josh, and back with you here again. Stoked as ever to introduce the album that you'll be listening to this week. So I'm wearing the correct Persefone shirt today. This is the actual album. It is Spiritual Migration by Persefone, or if you want to pronounce it incorrectly, like a cheese face, Persefone, as I've heard before. Don't do that. I think this is an incredible album. I wouldn't call it necessarily underrated. A lot of people within our community have heard of it and heard of this band, know what they're about. And it was a largely attended show at Prog Power. I mean, I'll merch flex on you guys. Got the set list from that. Now, they were supporting another album at that time, so they only played 1, 2, 3 from this album, but I lost my freaking mind when they did. So, epic performance. If you guys caught that, let me know. If you didn't, that's fine too. I was even at a Mastodon show and someone grabbed me and said, "That's my favorite album!" And I was like, yeah, dude, it's great. A couple of non-starters here that have just kind of stopped people from the get-go when I've recommended it before. It does have harsh death metal vocals, so that's number one. It is got big pieces of progressive music in there too, multi-instruments. And, the songs be long sometimes, so keep that in mind when you're dealing with this. There's also a lot of musical interludes. The musical interludes, for me, add to the songs, because you got these big songs, you got these big thematic elements, and those just expound on them, either by helping you transition down from a song or build up to a song. And I think it does a really good job of that. So let's just move into one of the things that I really like about it. This thing ebbs and flows like crazy. So you can go from the total chunk train of death metal guys screaming at you to birds chirping and a piano solo in the span of a minute on this album. So that is a plus for me. So, and if you get bored, just wait a little bit and you will be onto something new pretty soon. Now, as far as instruments that stand out, I feel like it's a stellar performance by all the instruments, because you have awesome guitar work, you got amazing drumming, you've got you got great birds on this album. I want to thank the birds guy that made the bird sounds, because it works. So in this total package of craziness, it's great. So the first time I heard a song by this, someone just randomly told me to listen to it, and the music blew me away, and I knew I needed to hear more of it, and that happened, right? But I got here for the music, but I stayed for the message. The thematic elements of this album resonate with me a lot. I'm not going to try to get all crazy, Charlie Day diagrammatic here for you, but what the album is about is the journey of life. And I mean, that's pretty vague, but so I combined my brain with analysis on the internet via Chat GPT. So we'll call this Chat Josh PT, and I'll flash it up on the screen here. So I got it to do a 2-word synopsis of every song, obviously excluding instrumentals, so you guys can look at it. Hopefully it's not too overwhelming, but as you're listening this week, if you can pull up the lyrics, I mean, that kind of gives you a very basic synopsis, but it goes deep, y'all. I've come back to this album so many times, and as you alluded to, Justin, in the last episode, almost every one of these songs has been my favorite at some point, where I gotta put it in my ear and listen to it. And I will say, with the exception of one song that has kind of just been a skipper before, and that is the last song, number 12, that has lyrics. And it's the longest song, too, so I shouldn't have skipped it that many times. It just kind of, you don't focus on it, right, when you're focused on the other ones. I know you guys did not tell me when you were going to pick this episode. And kind of maybe a month back, I had decided to go with this song as my song of the week because it has resonated with me like never before. And the song is about accepting death, and obviously it's from the first person perspective. That kind of hooked me this time. But little did I know that I would actually come into very close experience with death in the last week. I don't want to bring anything down, but I lost our family furry friend in an unexpected accident last Friday, and it took a huge toll on our family. But this song really helped, and it was crazy. It's crazy because I had decided this to be my song of the week, and the one that is now focused on for the last month or two before this happened. I'm not trying to get woo-woo here on you, but it is what it is. That's my song of the week. The music on it is tight. The lyrics blew me away this time, and I couldn't stop listening to it. So I'm interested to see what you guys pick, because there are some really good other songs on here. And I think that's it for me this week. Reach out to me if you guys are interested in learning too much information about this album. I'm an open book. So until next time, keep on exchanging, baby.
Yeah, so, it's funny. I'm glad Josh picked this, and even if he hadn't, this was something that was kind of on my list to get to as well. I always thought that they were going to be an interesting discussion because the music is, in some ways, like nothing you've ever heard, and in others, kind of a blend of a bunch of different bands because there's so many different layers to what this is. But before we get to the tracks proper, and I look forward to going through each of them, what really jumps out to me, the second you play it, but definitely after the first couple of listens, is that the production on this album is stellar. And I only wish I had a better sound system to listen to it on, because even with my modest equipment, this album sounds so good, and there's a lot going on. It's not just 2 guitars, a bass player, and drums, right? There's keyboards, there's symphonic elements, there's a lot of layers to the production, but it sounds phenomenal. And I have to start there because I don't think that any track gets its justice or its well due without noting the production up front.
Very well put. I was also very impressed with just the sonic quality of this album. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be too shocking. It didn't come out that long ago. It came out 12 years ago. But that said, it's like, you have no idea like what kind of budget and all that a band is working with. But yeah, I mean, progressive death metal is not going to be like my first choice of genres to listen to, but this is really, really crisp. And I agree with you. Like, I'm not working with like really high end equipment either. And I'm not really listening at super high volumes for, this is the type of music that is hard to work to, in a lot of ways. Just not even so much the growling, but just the really like fast technical parts are so it's almost like it pulls your attention away from whatever it is that you're doing. And so like, it's not a good mix for working to. You can't really like tap your foot to it because the time signatures are all over the place. It's like super chaotic. So, it took me probably until the fourth or fifth listen where I was just kind of like, all right, like this is starting to kind of take shape. I wish I had another week to listen to it a little bit more and just to like develop more of a sense of everything from track to track, because for me a lot of it kind of feels like one big production of like one long progressive like onslaught of music. But I have a feeling that you will lead the way on this, and I'll just chime in when necessary.
I'll try my best. And unlike other albums that we cover, I should note it also at the outset, this is a hard album to describe verse by verse, passage by passage, because it is, as you said, it is all over the place. This is the antithesis of catchy progressive metal, right? Like, this is not Threshold. This is something very, very different. And although it's very melodic in its own right, it's just all over the place in terms of the time signatures, like you mentioned. But even the way they go in and out of the chorus and the way they go in and out of the verses, it's wild. It's almost more like jazz music than it is rock music, just because it's literally like freestyle jazz. And so describing it in great detail is a little bit difficult. I think that it's really the kind of album you have to discuss almost in larger themes or just the thematic nature of certain songs, because within each composition, whether it's 4 minutes or 10 minutes, it shapeshifts like something trying to hide from a predator. It's just out of control.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. Nicely done.
And so I just wanted to mention one more thing before we start jumping into the songs themselves. And Josh makes a really good point of this. The thematic elements on this album combined with the instrumental passages make this just a very unique listen. And I say that because there's really only, I think, 6 tracks that actually have vocals on them, 6 or 7 tracks. And they tend to be some of the longer tracks on the album. But a lot of this album is just instrumental passages. And I kind of like the way that Josh mentions that they either bring you up or they bring you down, depending on where you are in the musical journey. But I find that to be one of the interesting elements, because a lot of these songs, not just a couple, but a lot of them are instrumentals.
Yeah, almost half the tracks are actually, half the tracks. No, I'm sorry.
Just one, almost more, a little more.
Yeah. 6 tracks are instrumental, 7 have lyrics.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, counting is the part of my job, sadly. So, yes, okay. So anyway, I had kind of made mention of this towards the beginning, is that like I find that these particularly these instrumental passages, I think really kind of give you a little bit of a break from the just the heaviness. There's a lot of heaviness and there's a lot of progginess, and this is probably one of those albums where I listened to it like once when it came out and I was like, okay, this not for me. I'll put on Rainseed now. But it's one of those things where you really have to listen to it, I think, a bunch of times to really appreciate what's going on, because it's just like, it really is an onslaught to the ears. And so these little, segues, I think, really kind of give you a chance to take a breath and kind of, absorb what you had just heard. This album only has 5 reviews on metalarchives.com, but it's for an average of 99% out of 100. So yeah. It's obviously the people that felt strongly enough to write a review about it were very impressed by it. And obviously, based on Josh's comments, he was as well. So yeah, if you're ready, let's dig into one of my all-time favorite creatures, flying sea dragons.
Not only is it one of my favorite creatures, it's one of my favorite intro tracks. Again, the production immediately jumps out. You get all these different sound effects from all over the map, really. And I think that it's an intro track with a recognizable keyboard riff that just permeates a lot of this song. It's short, but it's really intriguing. And I can just almost go back to the first time I heard it and being like, wow, this is different. What am I in for? And then it's like, you better kind of strap in, because Mind is Universe is probably one of the most well-known tracks off the album, and you are just off to the races immediately when that song kicks in.
Yeah, I feel like the keyboards that kind of lead the way in the background of the song have almost a like early Dream Theater, like Images and Words kind of that era of like a Kevin Moore-esque. It's more of like sweeping chords than it is like wacky solos, and it really, I think, gives it this symphonic feel right from the get go, and it's like, if you don't know what you're about to hear on track 2 when the vocals kick in, you might you might get the wrong idea that you're going to get maybe like a more Darkwater experience than maybe an Opeth with the Growls experience.
Yeah, it's almost like
I really do like the intro, though. It's a really, I think, cool way to get things going, and I was immediately hooked in because of the symphonic vibe of it.
It's like a false sense of security that when Mind is Universe kicks in, you realize, oh, good God, this is not almost what I thought it was. Mind is Universe has just this amazing guitar riff at the beginning that only to kind of be outdone by the drumming, which is just so tight on this track. It's fast, it's intense. But for my money, despite the harsh vocals and the very proggy nature of this song, it never really loses the melody, which is kind of important, at least to me. There's these like sweeping piano like sections that I love during the verses, and the growls are really enjoyable, and dare I say better than the cleans, which is not something that you'll often say, but the growls are just so well done. The only thing more incredible than a song like this is hearing them play this live, which was nothing short of amazing when I got to see them. Great song.
Yeah, one of the things that immediately comes to mind for me is that like a lot of the death metal that I'm used to listening to is melodic death metal. I don't listen to a ton of progressive death metal, so it's interesting because to me it's almost like a Dream Theater meets like Soilwork or Scar Symmetry kind of situation, but the parts where you were getting more of like those straightforward melodic passages, you're getting like more complicated proggy time signature changes and all that, and it really combines into this really like cool sounding just production of all this going on. And as overwhelmed as I was when this track first came on, the first couple of listens, like it really started to resonate more with me the more I would listen to it. And I can understand why this is a, one of the songs I think more people tend to gravitate towards. And I believe this was one of the tracks that they played live at Prog Power, even though I wasn't there. I pretty sure that was on the set list. And so, yeah, I mean, just really good stuff, just really heavy prog music. And then just, with like really, aggressive vocals, but like good death vocals. Like as far as, I mean, I'm no expert, but I didn't find it to be offensive in any sort of way.
No, they are standout vocals, and it's almost a shame. I should kind of go through the band briefly just so we know what we're talking about here. Um, the lineup is Tony Mestre on bass, Jordi Gorges on guitars, Carlos Lozano on lead guitars, Miguel Espinosa on keys, and he does some of the vocals as well. At the time, it was Mark Martins on vocals. He has since left the band. They have a new vocalist that came in around 2023, 2024. Also, Mark Maas on drums, just a fantastic drummer in his own right. And it's sad because the lineup now is just a little bit different than it was back in the day. I don't want to say this was the classic lineup. This is not a band that I think is even met their potential yet, but I just am so partial to his vocals that when I heard the new singer, it was a little jarring for me just because I thought this guy's growls are just really well done.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened, but I don't even think I realized that. So it's news to me. But I'm glad that you mentioned the guys in the band's name. I was just thinking to myself, like, wow, Justin never forgets to read off the band names. So good thing. I didn't want them to listen to the podcast and feel left out. The last thing I want to do is
what would the podcast?
The last thing I want to do is
what would the podcast be without? What would the podcast be without my mispronunciations?
That was, I think, one of your better outings. I'm not going to lie.
It's the connection to Andorra, obviously, but
or the lack of Eastern European names, I think, also helps.
That would help, and yeah, no argument for me. As we move ahead here and we get to track number 3, the Great Reality. This was another one that I had is very high on my list as a potential Song of the Week candidate. Another banger. Arguably even proggier of an intro with this really heavy focus on the keys and odd drum patterns that I can barely even count. The verses are a little bit slower, giving the growls really a chance to kind of stand out, while as the chorus is very melodic with the lush keyboards that kind of stand out in front of the drums. What I like about this track is just the very different changes in speed and the intensity of the vocals, which picks up around the 2-minute mark. Just a really good song with some great instrumentals towards the end as well. One of my favorites on the disc.
I was rather relieved to hear some clean vocals when this track came out, and I kind of like them. And granted, any clean vocals versus death vocals are going to be quite a change. But I really feel like there's a really nice dichotomy between these two vocals, and even the clean vocals really have kind of a unique vibe to it. So you get a little bit more of that in this track, which is really nice. I'm glad you mentioned the drums. This is some of the drumming on this is just out of control. Like, it's just I can't even imagine. My feet hurt just listening to those bass drums. It's really impressive stuff. This is instrumentally a very impressive song and just album in general. And for those who are listening and are not watching, Josh kind of flashed it was like a flashcard on the screen, and he basically put in the lyrical theme for each track. And so for those who didn't see it, I'll kind of mention them as we go along. The previous track, Mind as Universe, the lyrical theme would be Cosmic Awakening. This one, The Great Reality, is about existence unveiled. And if you take the time to, like, Josh mentioned, to really like kind of dig into the lyrics, it's really, really heady stuff. And so that's something I can appreciate, but I just didn't have the time. One of the problems about having a full-time job is that I can't like sit and really ingest lyrics as much as I would like. And with this,
when time was no issue, when I was a younger man, I used to really enjoy sitting there with a booklet, digesting the lyrics, listening to it, and then life got in the way, and it's just something I can't do
especially
anymore.
With vocals like this, where it's kind of hard to understand because it's death vocals. Like, having the lyrics in front of you is really helpful. So definitely recommend kind of like, if you get a chance to like read the lyrics while you're listening to the album, it's definitely worth checking out. There's some really good passages in here. So I did want to mention of that before we continued, because I thought that was a nice little visual aid that Josh provided. But I know not everybody watches the YouTube version for reasons I completely understand.
Yeah, well said. And it's funny because after two just like heavy, dense tunes, we get to Zazen Meditation, which almost screams instrumental, and it is. It's something Josh mentioned with the sounds of the birds and the woodwinds in the air, and it makes for this really unexpected start compared to what you just heard. And then the keys kick in about a minute or so into the track, and it has this ballad-like feel. It's a little slower paced. It's certainly melodic. And to their credit, it really does almost sound like this meditation music that you would hear at a spa or something like that. And then the final minute, it just builds to this really grandiose passage, which gets heavier, but kind of maintains that introspective nature. Just a really nice transition to the Majestic of Gaia, which was another one of the big tracks on this album.
Yeah, this was needed because, you just came back from 12 minutes or so of really, really heavy stuff. And so I think this really, just like I said earlier, gives you a couple of minutes really to take a breath, almost meditate on what you've just listened to. And like you said, it does a good job in that last minute of just kind of crescendoing and bringing a little bit more energy back into it before we get heavy again. And a little unknown fact, but the birds are actually, Arjen Lucassen does the voice of the bird. I'm just kidding. I made that up.
I wouldn't put it past.
It sounds like something you would see in a booklet, birds are Arjen Lucassen. He just, anytime somebody asks him to be on an album, he always seems to oblige. So that's just a little, the joke is good when you have to explain it. So anyway, the Majestic of Gaia, Justin, go.
Yeah, so the Majestic of Gaia, after that, kind of meditation type tune, is the longest song on the album to this point, and one of the 3 longest songs on the album. This was a song, as when I first heard it, probably the song that jumped out to me the most. I still love it. It's just it's not my song of the week. I wound up going with something else. But this song is fast, it's heavy, it's very technical, and the harsh vocals really stand out on this tune because it's a really proggy tune. This is kind of the quintessential prog death type of song. There's blast beats, there's sweeping time changes, there's church organs. I mean, this is all over the place. But what stands out, I think, is that really beautiful chorus. However, I can see you not enjoying this track because I feel like it's really inaccessible. This is not the kind of song that just grabs the listener. There's sampled spoken word sections. I really enjoy this. I've always liked it. And I like the ending that has this really ephemeral quality with the keyboards. I'm really curious, though, if this is something that you could tolerate this week, because I could see this being something that actually turned you off.
Actually, not at all. It's not my favorite track by any means, but really, what ties all this together for me is the keyboards just being a constant, just constantly being there, and I feel like that kind of keeps me grounded into the music, and that it's not just death metal. There's really these beautiful, orchestrations that are being played via the keyboard, and that keeps me kind of grounded. So while this is not the most melodic song on the album, I still really kind of appreciate the track for what it is, and especially, like you said, towards the end, it kind of chills out a little bit. And I had no issues with this track, although there are tracks I enjoyed more. As you probably could guess, a song called the Majestic of Gaia is a song about earth reverence, and literally the name of the album is in the lyrics. They say, we have to understand our planet evolves, rises, a crucial time, a gift of life, a spiritual migration. So there were times towards the beginning where I'd listen to this song and think that it was the title track because they mentioned spiritual migration in the lyrics, but it turns out that that's not the case. But no, I can understand why you would think that it's something that might be kind of a turnoff for me, but I thought it was fine. I don't think there was anything on this album that I thought was, offensive or like not enjoyable.
Nice. And to that end, although I stand by the fact I could see why one would say it's not digestible, it's finite in its approach. It's only 8.5 or so minutes, and you then go into two connected tracks that are both instrumentals, different names. Consciousness Part 1, Sitting in Silence. Consciousness Part 2, A Path to Enlightenment. But they're two instrumental tracks that are back to back. And the first of which kind of slows the album down and really gives you another chance to breathe. I love the guitar tone at the beginning, and it kind of slowly picks up, reminding me a lot of Animals as Leaders or one of the other modern prog bands that are out there. And there's something about that really clean sound. Unconsciousness Part 1 that I really like. And then all of a sudden that last minute is almost like a climax. It might actually be my favorite minute of the entire album. But for the lack of vocals, Consciousness Part 1 would be a song of the week for me, or at least a candidate. I'll talk about Part 2, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this first instrumental.
I honestly didn't even realize it was two separate tracks because
there you go.
I joined the tracks when I got the album. I used to be more of a put your entire library on shuffle kind of person. And so I would hate to only hear one part of a 2-part song. So I would typically just join the tracks as one track. And so I didn't even realize until now that I'm looking at the track list that this is actually two separate tracks, and they flow into each other so naturally that it didn't even like faze me that it's actually, it's two parts of one song. But
I can understand that. And like the only difference really, because again, it is so seamless. It's just, to me, that second part is just heavier. The drum fills are great. The production continues to be good, but it's just heavier. And it's almost like a mix of Dream Theater and Haken, but I can't really pinpoint it because it's got that crunch to it, unlike Part 1. And there's something about that blend of the guitar work and the keyboards that I just love. A really strong finish on this track too. And again, you're talking about the middle of the album with almost 10 minutes of instrumental material in a row after that epic tune that came before it. Something different here every time you listen, but well done.
Yeah, an album that I spoke with Knops about this week was the Beyond the Bridge album, which I think I mentioned last week as well, or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Tea Party. Recently, I remember bringing it up, but there is some really good instrumental prog on that album too, and some of this, the less heavier portions of this song reminded me of that quite a bit. And honestly, it's again, like if you're not a big fan of growls, there's a lot of nice parts where you just get a break from it. And these two tracks here are just one of those, breathers where you can just enjoy the progginess and not worry about somebody screaming at you, which is, for some people, that's a nice bonus.
If you're from New York, it's called Tuesday, but for everybody else, you might not enjoy it. And to that end, you might have a trouble with a track like Inner Fullness, the next track on the album. This is another heavy tune, almost a bit of a djenty vibe to it. It's really that heavy, especially with the guitars on the low end. And the vocals, again, really just kind of stand out after two instrumental tracks. Love the keyboard patches. I think the verses are strong and the chorus has that really great piano behind some heavy guitar riffs. This is a really proggy tune. It's hard for me to even pinpoint all the different time signatures. But when I think of like prog death, that kind of blends melody with technicality, this is a really good example of that. And I almost say to myself, if it didn't have the aggressive vocals, I'm not sure that I would enjoy the tune as much because it is all over the place. And then about a minute and a half left in the song, there's this instrumental section, which is very like subdued, and it leads into the final chorus. A lot of these tracks, this one included, ends very strong. But I like this track, but it's not my favorite on the album.
The thing that really this album drove home to me when I was listening to it was that, like, I feel like I would enjoy this band live a lot. And so by that logic, I should be mad that I didn't see them when they played at Prague Power. But I think at that time, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it. Like, I feel like since that time, I know it's only been like 7 years or whatever, but I feel like, especially through doing this podcast, like I have a different kind of feeling about certain bands. And I feel like if I were to see this band now, I feel like if they sound even half as good as the production of this album live, and there's a live keyboardist involved, I feel like this would be really, really good stuff. Like this kind of music to me, I enjoy even more in a live setting because it really just, it surrounds you and you can't really escape it. And because it's so like just dense and I don't know, like I can't think of the right word to describe it, but like I just feel like you're almost like inside this wall of sound, and I feel like it's kind of, unless you just absolutely don't like this type of music, it's hard not to appreciate what's happening. So I guess that's my way of saying I don't feel too bad that I didn't see their set, but if I had the opportunity to see them at Prague Power, you know, in the future, I don't think I would miss them at all. I mean, I bought the damn shirt that I was wearing on the podcast last week completely unplanned, and because I thought the shirt was so awesome. The mega, like, first of all, a white metal shirt is always a draw for me because I have enough black shirts to last me until the end of time. But so like not just the fact that it was white, but the fact that it had a Mega Man theme, on it. It was like, even if I'd never listened to a note from the band in my life, I would have bought that shirt. Like it just,
it is a great shirt. I wish I kind of got it myself. And you're right. Like, I think that if nothing else, this has kind of opened your eyes to certain things and increase the tolerance or the size of your palate in many ways. So I totally get it.
And this is a perfect track to bring that up because it's a track about self-discovery.
Yeah, bingo. There you go. And I think to myself, like, not only would you might not have been into it years ago, but it makes me think of 70,000 Tons, where there's even bands that are like, I'm not going to say outside of my comfort zone, but styles that I don't gravitate towards on a regular basis. But for that week, I'm totally into it because I'm almost like sucked into the surroundings and the music live and everything else. And I could totally seeing this being something like that.
Yeah, makes complete sense, honestly. Have they played on the cruise?
They have, and although it was not while I was there, so they're due to come back, and I could definitely see that at some point. I haven't seen them in quite some time. I think that they were supposed to do a U.S. tour this year. I think that they may have had issues with that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but happy that I got to go back and listen to this. And as we kind of like forge on ahead here, we get to the ninth track, Meditation, which is another instrumental, not the last one, but close. This kind of starts off slow and unassuming with the guitar work and kind of reminds me of like a Steve Vai or something like that more than anything else. It doesn't really sound like a metal band per se at the start, but it begins to pick up with the low end about a minute in. Kind of reverts back to that subdued sound, but you can feel that they're building to something. But it really does end like kind of like a ballady instrumental tracks. I could argue that some might say, oh, this is a boring track, or this is a track that doesn't really go anywhere. But like for me, it's all about the contrast between something like this and Inner Fullness, which comes before it.
I 100% agree. Like I said, I feel like having these little breaks really benefits the experience, and that you're not getting drowned in death metal without a break, and especially in a proggy environment, it's good to have these kind of changes. And so I really appreciate a track like this. And in all honesty, it's like I would be all about like spas playing this kind of music. Like when you go to get a massage, I find like that kind of new age music to be so it's like too relaxing. Like it like lulls you to sleep. And one of my things I hate to do is fall asleep during a massage, because then you miss the wonderful, like people are like, that's the best thing. I'm like, no, you're missing out the best part of the massage.
The whole part is feeling what you're actually getting.
Yeah, I get plenty of sleep at home. I don't need to pay to sleep somewhere else. So give me a little more of the meta meditation, the Zazen meditation, while I'm getting my rub down. I think that would be a lot more enjoyable for me. However, once Upward Explosion starts playing, I think it might be time to leave.
Yeah, then we go to a different spot altogether, and we're getting to the end here. This is, as I said, the first of 3 tracks in a row before the final instrumental tune. I'm wondering what your song of the week is going to be. I had a guess going into it. I didn't think it was Upward Explosion, but this is an explosion indeed. It's not the heaviest track, but it's definitely on the upper end of the prog death on the album. Love the keyboards. They don't dominate, but the subtle times they are used very, very well on this track. And it has more of a groovy or like a chug-like quality to it on this track, almost like a band like Orbit Culture or one of those groove metal bands. And then about a minute left in the track, it fades out and it kind of ends with these spacey keyboards that you'd hear on like a Star One album, or almost like something Kevin Moore was doing with OSI or something like that. Wondering what your thoughts are on Upward Explosion. It's a shorter tune for sure. It only clocks in at 2 minutes and 55 seconds, but a lot packed into that 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's almost surprising how short it is for one of the heavier, like, non-instrumental tracks. And this is a song about a transcendent moment. I just pulled up the lyrics, and it's literally like 12 lines of text. Like, it's really kind of an in and out situation. Almost in a lot of ways feels like maybe more of a prelude to spiritual migration than like a full blown song. But I think it does its job. And I kind of like how this track followed by the next 2 tracks, and thanks to Josh again for providing us with the lyrical themes. But you go from transcendent moment to existential grounding to accepting death, and that's like a really interesting journey, I feel like, from song to song. I'm gonna guess that we may have the same song of the week this week, because I chose Spiritual Migration.
Why did you choose this? This is an epic tune for sure. A song that does not get lost in its 8 minutes and 47 seconds, even though it's on the back end. I did choose it too. I thought you were going to choose Returning to the Source at the outset, but we did have the same track of the week this week. Before we give it a listen, why did you choose it?
Honestly, one of the most memorable parts of the album for me, every time I listen to it, is about 4 minutes into the song. It just has that like weird spacey keyboard thing that goes on for a couple of minutes before the song starts to get heavy again. And for whatever reason, I was really drawn to that weird, like almost sci-fi-esque keyboard sound. And so it ended up being the song that I most looked forward to. And as I started listening to like the parts of the song that, were before and after that part, I just like realized this is the song that I just seem to enjoy the most. And I also think that I was a little bit familiar with it coming into it. So I think that probably helped too. But everything about like all the things that we've mentioned, me, you, and Josh, that we like about this album thus far, I think really just is rolled up all into one on this track. And like all the things that this album does well, it does incredibly well, all in this 8 and 45 minute track. I just think that like, it's got the clean vocals, it's got the heavy vocals, it's got the double bass drums, the intricate guitar solos, like the spacey keyboards. It just kind of has everything that makes this album great, really rolled into one. So I hope that is a good explanation. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I have a few things to add, but I think that's really well said. Let's give Spiritual Migration a listen, and I'll come back in a minute. think you did a really nice job of kind of summarizing that track. So I'm not going to rehash a bunch of what you said, but a couple of things that stand out to me. It's one of the better choruses, and one of the things they do on the choruses is that they actually layer the vocals between the cleans and the growls, that you're hearing them together. Most of the album, it's one or the other, but on this track, there are spots where there's actually layers of vocals, which I find to be a really nice touch. I also enjoy that like spacey instrumental section, and I thought that it really stood out because that leads into this big ending, and I just thought it put a real like exclamation mark on the song. I think the hardest thing for you is going to be picking a minute of it because it's a really good song from top to bottom. But I was a little surprised. I thought you might choose Returning to the Source, the penultimate track. This is really a heavy track, very keyboard driven. And there are parts, at least with the orchestration, that I thought it had a Camelot vibe. And for that reason, I thought you'd be attracted to it. But it's almost like the quintessential jazz tune because it's all over the place. There are the aggressive portions about 2 minutes in when the song gets really fast. And because of those power metal leanings, I thought it might be your song of the week. Even the instrumental section on this song has a little bit of a power metal feel to it. And then all of a sudden, the outro of this song is really kind of the album's main theme that you hear in different spots throughout the album. So I thought it was a really strong track, and almost wonder if this should have been the ending track. Because not to get ahead of ourselves, but the outro or the end of this track or album is this almost 4-minute piece called Outro. And although it's a beautiful piano-laden, understated instrumental tune, I don't know that it was necessary. It's beautiful. I like it. I just don't know that you needed it. I think you could have ended the album with Returning to the Source and been very, very pleased.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but I think also because there's so many instrumental tracks throughout this album, it starts with instrumental tracks, so they probably wanted to like end with an instrumental track. But I say, since we both chose the same song and Josh chose this as the song of the week, we should toss it on for a minute. I think it's another song that's going to be difficult to choose a minute from, but I'll do my best. And we'll come back and wrap things up.
So that was Returning to the Source. And as we kind of wrap this up with the instrumental outro, was there anything that stuck out to you about that? I mean, it's kind of innocuous, as I mentioned, very piano and keyboard heavy, but an interesting way to end the album with another instrumental here.
Yeah, I mean, I will echo your thoughts on Returning to the Source. I get why you would think that it's a Song of the Week candidate. For me, it's probably my runner-up. I also think Mind is Universe is up there too. I kind of like, again, much like in the previous track, like I mentioned, that kind of repetitive, like kind of spacey keyboard solo. This has a very like this fade out repeated guitar riff that I find is really catchy in its own way. So yeah, moving on to outro. I'm going to say that this should be here, I think, just because, like I said, there's so many spots throughout the album where we kind of take a little bit of a breath from the heaviness and the really technical metal stuff. And, we opened up with a pretty intense intro. And so I think this is a really nice way to just kind of sail off. It has this kind of like sailing off into the horizon kind of feel to it. And I think that it's a really beautiful way to wrap things off, because it's such a dichotomy from some of this like heavy riff, heavy drums, heavy vocals, and now you have like this really beautiful, almost like end credits sort of track that I think it actually fits really nicely to end on this. Like it's not like a power metal album like a Return to Heaven Denied, where you really want to end the album on like one of the best songs on the album, because it deserves that. I feel like this is more of this journey that takes you, it's a roller coaster of ups and downs. And so I feel like ending it on kind of a down, not down in a negative way, but just down in like a quieter, more mellow sort of way, is actually a perfect way to wrap things up. And so I feel like it does, I think it could have ended on Returning to the Source, but I think this adds a really nice extra element of finality to the album.
Well said. Enough to maybe even convince me that you're right. I think that is well argued.
Oh, I should have stayed in law school for another semester. Maybe it would have stuck.
And then you could have started arguing about Andorran prog death metal bands with your law school classmates, and they would have no retort. But no, you're right. I thought it was just really, really well argued. So duly noted. For my money, this band kind of took off where bands like Opeth had left off in the 2000s. And obviously Opeth is still around, but they would go with a very different direction. And certainly by 2013, they were doing more of the prog rock thing. These guys took that prog death mantle and kind of just catapulted it to the next level. And again, with that awesome production. So for me, I'm not going to say it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I'm not going to say that it's an album that I go back to all the time, because I think you have to be in the mood for it. But when you are, it is a fantastic release. So for me, it's like a 7.75, probably an 8. I'll make it an 8 just because it is one of the best prog death albums of the entire decade, possibly of the last 15 years. So for me, I'd be remiss not to give it an 8. And I like it almost as much as I did when I first heard it a dozen years ago.
This is one of those albums where, for me, the score on day 1 versus the score on day 5, 6, 7, whatever you want to call it, was I think, a drastic difference, because I probably on first listen would have given it like a 5 or a 5.5, but I'm going to give it a 7. I thought it was really solid. It's not probably in like my top 5 genres that I'm going to choose to listen to. And it was a challenge on certain days or in certain moods to listen to something like this. This is, for me, like really mood music. And so I think you had mentioned, I think recently that like there's certain things you need to be in a certain mood for. I think it was Exodus, actually, like where you have to be in that kind of mood. And for me, that's kind of what this is. And so I think there was one day this week where I legit I couldn't even turn it on. Like my brain was just not in that space. It just wasn't going to happen. And so there was a day where I just had to be like, I can't migrate spiritually today. I'm sorry. But I for what it is, I think I can't imagine liking progressive death metal much more than I do this album. So many thanks to our friend Josh for choosing it. We get an extra request this month. Which is always nice. It's always nice to hear from our Patreon subscribers, especially two requests in a row where we get a video blurb, which I really appreciate. And Josh, we are going to have some behind closed doors meetings about you coming on as our editor, because your editing skills make me look like I'm working on Microsoft Paint. So.
Which wouldn't be the first time, but alas, not what we're going for here. But thanks for the request. I just want to mention a few news items before we talk about next week. A band we will be talking about in the very near future, Suicidal Tendencies, has released their new single, Adrenaline Addict, described as a crossover thrash hardcore punk band. Adrenaline Addict is now out. They're going to be doing some opening spots on the Metallica World Tour, which starts about I think it's tomorrow, actually, as a matter of fact, but definitely this weekend. And a band that I'm not familiar with, but they're recently celebrated their 40th anniversary back in 2023. So I look forward to covering them in the not so distant future. Cryptopsy, another band that's been around for more than 30 years, death metal band, coming out with their new album, An Insatiable Violence, coming out June 20th of this year. A band that I've seen on 70,000 Tons, a band that is excellent at what they do. So that is an album to look forward to if you're into the whole death metal scene. They are obviously from Montreal. And I was wondering if you heard about this. I don't know if you heard Roy Khan announce that he'd be, quote, open to doing something with Kamelot again, saying that they've been talking about it. And then Thomas Youngblood coming out like the next day saying, yeah, there's no plans to work with Roy in the future. I thought that was, it was like the best of times. It was the worst of times in a matter of 24 hours. But your thoughts on Roy possibly getting back together with Kamelot again?
I don't know if you heard the news, but I have entertained the thought of listening to that if that were something that they did. I mean, I'd love to hear it. I always thought that I missed the boat on seeing Roy Khan sing live completely, and never getting to see Conception play, and that managed to happen. I never thought I'd see Michael Kiske sing with Helloween. Shit happens, money talks, time heals all wounds. Pick your cliche, but I would love to see it. It seems like Roy, much like Kiske, has kind of re-embraced the metal scene after taking a bit of a sabbatical from it. So you know my thoughts. Like I love particularly the early Khan era of Kamelot, and so with him basically coming out and saying he's going to do solo shows playing all of Black Halo. I have to say, like, I'm not one to like jump on a plane and start heading to foreign countries to see shows. That's more of a financial situation than a not wanting to spend that much time in the air. But I have to say the Edu Falashi doing Temple of Shadows with Roy doing all of Black Halo it's a tempting show. If they were opening for Sabotage, I think I could probably justify buying a ticket to Brazil to see that show. But that's pretty awesome. So yeah, good stuff.
To say the least.
I mean, who knows? Kamelot, I don't think, is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, you never know what will happen in time.
I've gone on record in the past. I'll say it again. I think that is not a question of if, but when that happens. I don't have any inside information, but I am just reading the tea leaves. And the fact that they're even having dialogue potentially about it means I think it happens at some point.
And mind you, this is the guy who predicted Portnoy would be back in Dream Theater 2 days before Portnoy was back in Dream Theater. So,
well, I predicted it a lot sooner, but I went public with it 2 days prior. But you are correct. But as we forge ahead here, the month of April is not over. We've got one more album to cover, and it is your choice. So why don't you do the big reveal and tell us what we're covering this week before we do another request at the beginning of next month?
Yeah, so this is funny because this is an album that one of the bands that we covered and spoke to had kind of mentioned in one of our online chats. I believe it was on Instagram. And I'm talking about our friend Zorn from Zornheim. And at one point, I think that what brought him or brought us into his radar, I should say, was our episode on Symphony of Enchanted Lands by Rhapsody. And, he had said that a lot of what Zornheim does from the symphonic element is inspired by Rhapsody. And I'm hoping that this was Zorn who said this. I'm almost positive it was. I probably should have went back and looked, but I think he had asked, like, do you think you guys would ever do an episode on Luca Turilli's second solo album, Prophet of the Last Eclipse? And I can't remember exactly like what your response to that was. I've always really liked this album, and it kind of lands right at the very end of like my first era of being a metal fan, because I remember Prince of the Starlight was like a track that they released. It wasn't a single, they just released it ahead of time online, and I remember hearing it and being incredibly excited about this album. And whereas like the first solo album has kind of like a medieval vibe to it, this album has kind of more of a sci-fi kind of vibe, even though the like musically it's very similar, but like there are, especially with the keyboards, it's a different vibe. And so I've always really liked this album, and as over the last few weeks, I've listened to it a bunch of times, and the more and more I listen to it, I'm like, man, I feel like people slept on this album. It's really good. So that's what I've chosen to make a long story short, and I'm really excited to talk about it. There's also a shit ton of bonus tracks and B-sides from this release that I want to talk about. Some really cool instrumental stuff, an awesome cover, a guest vocal situation that I will reveal next week because it's really cool. So yeah, that's what I had planned. Like I said, I have this whole list of albums that I want to talk about, but this one just kept creeping its way up to the top of the list, and as it tends to do, as every time this week that Persefone ended, this album would start, and I could not turn it off, especially because it made for such a good palate cleanser after listening to such a like heavy and intense album. This is like a little bit lighter and a little bit more, just my style of music. So it made for a really nice follow up. And so it really just kind of solidified my decision to choose it. So, yeah, that's what I went with. So we'll do our next request the following week. But I'm pretty pumped to talk about this. I don't know that me and you have ever really talked about this album much at all. So
I'll say this, and this is without kind of giving away too much. We talked about King of the Nordic Twilight. This came out in 2002. He came out with another album, The Infinite Wonders of Creation, in 2006. I love the first album. I really did not care at all for that third album. This album, I'll just say it's somewhere in the middle. I won't say anything else, but it's been a long time since I've heard it. I have not played this album a lot, and I don't know that I've played it in 20 years. So this will be really interesting.
I think
for me. So good choice.
I think it's going to surprise you. I think it's going to be better than you remembered. I'll just say that.
Okay. I'll say that I do not have high expectations. This was an album that I kind of slept on, like I said, over the last 20 plus years. So look forward to that. Thank you to all of our Patreon members. As always, you are the backbone of this show, and we appreciate you all. To everybody else who's listening, thank you. Give us a like and a follow. It helps others find the show. And we will come back next week with some some power metal celebrating the near 25th anniversary of Prophet of the Last Eclipse. Any other parting words?
No. I was going to talk about the new Epica and Elven King albums, but you know what? I'll listen to them one more time, and then I will talk about them next week instead. So
sounds good. Enjoy the week, my friend, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. See you, buddy.